Hello, Alex.
Hello.
Hi, Alex. How are you this evening?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Um, Good evening and welcome to the CASAA update for the week of 9/14/2015. So, can you tell us what's been going on lately, Alex?
Well, an appropriate place to start would be California.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm actually looking at a draft ordinance from El Cerrito
Oh, God.
or
El
El
Cerrito?
Cerrito. I don't know if they go with the hard T there. El Cerrito, California. Um, and there's going to be, I guess they're introducing the draft ordinance tomorrow evening. I haven't really dug into this, but I was just reading it. And I believe somewhere in here there is a proposed flavor ban, mostly because I guess they're going to redefine electronic smoking device. Um, yep, flavored tobacco product includes electronic cigarettes. So El Cerrito, I believe we have an existing call to action for this or something else in El Cerrito.
I think so.
I apologize. I drove around my neighborhood for half an hour looking for parking, so
Oh, no.
I haven't really had a chance to sit down and go over stuff. Um,
Sorry.
it's not sure it's not your fault. I live in the most densely populated city in America, so um, parking tends to be a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's that. But the real news out of California is all of the horrible tobacco control bills um, that were in the special session. Which, if you haven't been following this, or if you're new to this, whatever. So this special session was brought about. I believe there was a transportation bill, or there was something that had to do with the budget and transportation that really needed to get addressed. And so they called there's the sort of the first special session and the second special session, or extraordinary sessions. And the public health extraordinary session was another budget thing, and there were some very real, healthcare type considerations that California was dealing with. And so
Right.
this was to a handful of lawmakers a perfect opportunity to slide in all of these other bills to kind of circumvent the normal legislative process, because uh, traditionally, or I guess as is just the normal process in California,
Right.
any kind of tobacco related bill ends up going in front of the Assembly Governmental Organization Committee.
Right.
And they, in the past, over the past couple of years, and I guess traditionally, they are somewhat friendly to tobacco. So it's very, very difficult to pass any kind of tobacco control type legislation through this committee.
Okay.
And this is essentially what we saw again this year. Senator Leno introduced SB 140. It made it through the Senate, I think, with no problem, and got to this assembly, the GO committee, and that's where it was amended. And he, raised a huge stink and said, "I can't put my name on this bill anymore. It's been, I just whatever." This was a bill even after the GO committee got done. Essentially, what happened in the committee was they just took out the language, or they changed the language that regulated electronic cigarettes as essentially combustible tobacco products. And just that minor change. I mean, it's still, I think, strengthened, regulations that prohibit minors from getting a hold of these things, and it strengthened a lot of regulations.
Right.
But because he lost that definition, he walked away from the bill. So, yeah, that is to kind of summarize for folks who haven't been following this very closely. So,
he's like that guy.
Go ahead.
He's kind of like that. He's kind of like that senator in Oregon that every year tries to make it so that all nicotine-containing products are only available with a prescription. You know, it never passes. He throws a fit, and every year he comes back with the same thing. He's kind of like California's kind of like that guy. He's kind of like that guy from Oregon. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think there's one in New York. We have, Senator Kemp Hannon, and what is her name? I get the Rosenberg or Rosenbaum, Rosenfeld. I get them all mixed up.
I think it's Rosenberg, but
yeah, there are two tobacco control women who their last name begins with Rosen, and one's from New Jersey Gasp, and then there's the other. I believe she is an assembly member from New York, and so I get them confused because of their last names. They're different. They're Rosen something. But yes, I think it's, and they might actually have the same first name. Wow, this is driving me crazy.
Sorry.
So her and Kemp Hannon, Senator Kemp Hannon, bring back this sort of 4 to 8 tobacco bills every year in New York. So yeah, if you've been paying attention to New York and California, you can expect to see all of this legislation again in December and January.
Yay!
And so this is a really this brings up a very important point. I'm sure that there are thousands of vapors in California that are ecstatic about the results of this special session, that being that none of these bills really went anywhere. The session adjourned before they were brought to the floor in the assembly. But since these are special sessions, I believe, if I read this correctly, they can sort of come back up over the next few months. That they may not actually get to a full floor vote. The entire legislature there might not be enough legislators in town to take a vote on anything. I don't exactly know how the special sessions work.
So these are zombie vaping bills, basically. At any point, they could come back and try to bite you?
Well, you can pretty much, yes, they are zombie bills, and quite lethal. They will most likely be reintroduced at the beginning of the session next year, which is always, to me, kind of frightening because, you sort of gotten a jump start on this stuff. So, some of these bills that we saw in the extraordinary session, they didn't really get introduced until this summer. So, and it was there was a lot of pressure to get this stuff passed, and so, whatever, it just didn't happen. But if they come in at, on the first week of the regular legislative session, then they've got, 9 months to get this stuff dealt with. So now they've got even more time. And so that's particularly frightening. So yes, this is, CASAA looks at this, and I think some other very level-headed advocates out there look at this as a temporary reprieve. People can take a sigh of relief. I think that might be the proper duration, a sigh. Not a full-blown deep breath. Can't, it's not time to turn off the lights and walk away.
Right.
So, yeah. Of course, in the meantime, Carl Phillips is working on a gateway study. Certainly to be realistic, this isn't going to be some monumental. There are no monumental, just game-changing studies out there. No matter what we want to believe,
Right.
Science is a living, breathing thing. But this will be another thing that we will have in our toolbox to argue to argue policy.
Yeah.
And I'm very much looking forward to that. And
Me too.
hopefully, we will be able to more effectively use something like that to combat some of the claims that, the kids.
It's for the children. Save the children. Sorry, I was channeling Bill Hicks. I couldn't help it.
So that, in a nutshell, is California, and I just want to, if it's appropriate, give a shout out to the NorCal, SoCal, SFATA chapters, and Notblowingsmoke, who did quite a bit of legwork in getting down to Sacramento, helping people organize to get down there or up there, depending on where you live, and putting together a slick series of engaging posts and whatnot to get people involved. So it's certainly throughout the rest of the country, everybody's kind of got a different flavor or a different approach. But I just, personally, on a personal note, I have to say I really appreciate the amount of work and effort that went into to what they've done, and I think that it was very, very helpful, and I'm glad that we were able to support in whatever way that we could. We have I think we're at or just above 6,000 members in California.
Wow.
In the last round of this special session, we had over 1,500 people sending emails, which amounted to several thousand emails because you're sending it to your assembly member and your senator, and then there was a good chunk of people that made phone calls through our system that we were able to monitor. So
nice.
Again, it's good to see California come together and really make some noise.
Yay.
So yeah, feel good, hugs all around.
You wear the zombie bills, they'll be back.
Yeah, enjoy it while it lasts. Huddle by the campfire, eat the can of beans, and live to fight another day. So moving on, if we've thoroughly covered California,
I think so.
The next two places on fire, I guess we'll look at Alabama. There is a movement afoot. Alabama, another state that's gone into overtime with their legislative session. I believe they've got a budget that needs to be dealt with.
Right.
And the governor is pushing to, first of all, they wanted to raise taxes on cigarettes. And I think that may have extended to other tobacco products. I have to go back and read the bill.
Right.
But they actually wanted a pretty large tax increase on cigarettes. And that was somewhat shut down. I think it came down to 25 cents a pack was the rate. They were raising the tax on cigarettes to 20. They're raising it by 25 cents a pack. I don't know what the total is going to be. But they didn't get exactly what they wanted. But there is still some hubbub in the legislature. There's I believe, a senator pushing for extending tobacco taxes to include vapor products.
Nice.
So before the weekend, there was a threat that vapor products would make it into this tobacco tax hike bill, but it never made it in, as far as I understand.
Okay.
But there is still another vehicle through which these taxes could be applied. So I'm, trying to keep tabs on this the best I can. The Breathe Easy Alliance of Alabama, check their Facebook page out. They have been, I believe they're working with a lobbyist, and they're actually, right up front with this. So they have some good information on their Facebook page, and I need to check that myself. So, if they, to be honest, again, at the state level, when somebody is, when people have things handled, sometimes we can take kind of a hands-off approach to stuff. But Alabama, we're here if you need a little help. We can certainly put some stuff out and work to mobilize the consumer pretty effectively. So, so that's that. We'll be following that this week and see what happens. And then on to Chicago. I believe it was 2 weeks ago, I put out a kind of a call to action. Mayor Rahm Emanuel held 3 kind of town hall style meetings in Chicago, which I just went back and started watching Parks and Recreation with my wife. And every time they have one of those kind of public hearings, I mean, it is kind of funny. I mean, it's a funny show. It's comedy. So, you get that one guy was it the woman that's just like, I ate a sandwich that I found in your park and it made me sick. There should be signs in your park that just don't eat sandwiches or something like that. I sort of imagine that, but the residents of Chicago are expressing very real rage. So I guess to some extent, I think you have to be a bit insane to even to want to be the mayor of Chicago or a major metropolitan city. I don't know how these people do it. I'm sure there's some sort of clinical diagnosis for it, but so that's about how well these public hearings went. And I do believe there was one person that went up and was able to speak about the electronic cigarette issue. So we might have covered all of this already, but now we're moving into this week, and we don't have a date to give you on when we think this proposed ordinance or law is going to be introduced into City Council, but it's a very real threat. There is an alderman who is going to be likely proposing a tax on electronic cigarettes that would essentially tax them at the same rate as cigarettes. It's very much like DC. I assume who else was trying to do it?
Oh, there are a bunch of places. I mean, mostly little municipalities, but I don't think that many of them passed because there's really no way to get tax parity between the two. They can try, but
to be honest, I think that the Washington D.C. model is probably the closest thing to it, where it's based on a percentage, so it's not exactly 1 for 1, I think, but it's very close, and still, as far as we're concerned, a very damaging.
Well, it's going to drive business right out. Small business owners are going to be shut down, and there go jobs. They've quickly smacked right into the laugher curve with this stuff. Shame.
Yeah, and it's not doing anybody any favors. It's certainly not benefiting public health, and the one, and I think I mentioned this last week, the one really important thing to come out of the Public Health England report is that the very simply put statement of we should be promoting these products to people and not discouraging use. And we can we can gravitate toward the subtext of tobacco taxes and say this is all about the money, but what they sell this to the public as is a an effort to discourage people from young people from initiating on these products, and
Right.
existing users to use them so much. So, these people have never walked into a vape shop and experienced a $20 starter kit, which to a smoker who's used to spending, anywhere from $5 to $8 a pack, that's a huge investment. And, even for people who have respectable jobs making tens of thousands of dollars a year, looking at these products, there's a sticker shock there. And
Right.
so, I don't know I know that parents get their kids cell phones now, but what kind of allowance are people giving their kids that they can afford, high-end vaping products? And, like,
I don't know. I can't even imagine, because I can't afford anything high end. So, imagining somebody with, like, say, one of Cisco's rebuildable Addies and a really nice 200-watt chipped mod. I just have to find myself imagining it, because I can't. I couldn't even tell you. Maybe it's teenagers who have their own jobs making really good money. I don't know what that would be, though, because most kids don't have jobs. So I don't know. But you're right. Public health is completely out of touch with the common man. The fears that they bring up and all these other things, they don't resonate with people in the real world. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Especially when it comes to the amount of money they think that children are spending on this stuff. I don't know. They don't live in the same stratosphere as we do, I think.
Yeah, and and the bar for being a lifetime user of the demon nicotine, if you're a young person, is remarkably low.
Yeah.
So every time I see one of these studies, I think about it, and for me, getting hooked on cigarettes was a process. It wasn't, I didn't, my first couple of cigarettes actually made me physically ill. It wasn't, I didn't take a puff off a cigarette and immediately turn to a life of crime. It was, I developed it over several years. I mean, and I started smoking around 13 years old, and I had to stop for a couple of years because I got in trouble for doing some other stuff, and the spotlight and watchtower went up around my life for a little while, but
Right.
as soon as I got some autonomy, then I was back to taking risks again. And it's I think it's absurd. I think it does there's sort of a scientific malpractice there when we talk about tobacco products in general,
Right.
from this perspective of not even once, like, if you smoke this cigarette, kid, by the end of the month, you're going to be performing sex acts in a park to supplement your habit here.
And yet nobody ever brings up that there was a hit drama in this country about a teacher who had to take to making large quantities of methamphetamine to pay for their fucking medical bills. This is what I'm saying. They are completely out of touch with us. They have no idea what they're talking about. So I don't know how anybody with 3 brain cells to rub together can pay any attention to them, because they're just making it up as they go along. And I know that didn't really relate, but You know what I mean? That's more of the reality of how things are. You got to deal drugs to pay for chemo in this country. Not I'm going to get a job so I can buy a $300 mod / Addy and just, vape my brains out, and then I'm going to go become a prostitute. That's not what happens. It just isn't.
Well, even on the smaller scale, the concern, a lot of this, the tobacco control science people they're looking at the convenience store entry. So it's picking up the cig-alike for $10 or $5. I've seen some pretty cheap ones out there, and that's your pathway to addiction immediately. No questions. If you've done this in the past 30 days, you're at risk for the rest of your life.
Well, I mean, what kills me too, if you read any of these studies that tobacco control is now doing, they're actually, and I don't know how an IRB board is giving them clearance for this, but they're actually testing nicotine now on non-smokers. How do you get clearance to test that? Years ago, that was a no-go. And now it's okay?
Well, obviously, it doesn't have the magical powers that we have been told that it does. I guess that's the only way you can get past the ethics people, right?
I guess.
I'm sure that study, disproving the magical powers of nicotine is probably buried somewhere.
I'm sure it's spun some other way. Yeah. If it's not buried, it's spun.
But if this brings up another, important point, and that is that, I can't remember the specific example, and it's probably just as well. But there's sort of a call for measuring our responses, measuring our actions a bit as tobacco harm reduction advocates. And, we really do, going forward, continuing, however you want to see it, need to place an emphasis on high quality studies.
Right.
However you want to define high quality. I do believe that there is some debate over what quality actually is, but totally different philosophical discussion, I'm sure.
Right.
But, for decades, likely centuries, anti-tobacco people have ginned up their studies to serve their agenda.
Right.
And we cannot fight back using that strategy, because the folks that we are having this conversation with, or trying to have this conversation with,
right.
Are a lot of them are heavily invested in this tobacco control industry, and they are very adept at picking holes in our arguments and twisting our words, and so we're definitely, we're the little guy in this scenario. Not that anybody really needs to be reminded of that, but
right.
I do just want to put that out there, because every week we see things posted online, and people are very excited about good news, and this study, or this person came out, or this article, and it's there was a good article that was actually written by a couple of people on our board of advisors, and they used some numbers in there that are not necessarily the best numbers or statements to make, and so it's it's very important to think about that and consider it before, I guess,
running amok with it.
Running amok with, I was thinking celebrations in the streets, shooting off pistols and whatever, crazy.
I don't know what kind of parties you guys have.
I don't know. We're not allowed to have those parties. This is North Jersey, so it's just
yeah, we're not allowed to have those here either. Much as it might seem tempting, but yeah.
So anyway, yeah, it was a interesting aside there, and I think yeah, it's the slow period, so we have to find other things to talk about. I apologize if we're just rehashing all of this stuff.
I don't think we are. HR 2058 still active, right? Have we picked up any more co-sponsors? Do we know, or?
I haven't gotten any alerts. All of our federal legislators are sort of just getting back into their DC offices, so it's they're settling back into their offices and getting back to work. But the point being that this is an ideal time for everybody to get back on the email sending kick, and probably send out a reminder this week. Your lawmakers are in their offices and deserve to hear from you.
Yeah, that's true. They can't do what you want unless you tell them. Well, all right. They can't pretend to do what you want unless you tell them. So, and that's always important. So, and I guess would that be it?
Pretty much. We should definitely throw in another plug for the European version of the Testimonials project, spearheaded EVUN. EVUN. I'm not sure how you say it, but definitely a worthwhile project for international harm reduction advocates. Please go and leave your story. It's not a CASAA project, but it is the folks from EVUN reached out to us, and we were able to give some assistance. And I forgot to look up the link again.
www.mystory.evun.org, I think. So if you're from the UK, you should definitely go check it out and share your story, because this is going to be one of the ways that, thank you, Very, that we're able to persuade people that this is a valid form of tobacco harm reduction. If you don't tell people your stories, and there is no way to correlate those, then you're at a disadvantage. So having something like this is a really big plus. It really helps, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you haven't already, share your testimonials at testimonials@CASAA.org. Join us at www.CASAA.org. If you're not already a member, come see us on Facebook on the official CASAA Facebook page, or the group We Are CASAA. We would love to talk to you. We are CASAA Media on Instagram and Twitter, and I believe Google+. So come on down and talk to us. We want to help you. Thanks for everything you do, Alex. Have a great night.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.